want to welcome you to our podcast, World According to Rocky, and I am your host, Rocky Miller. Um, we have a very good show planned tonight. We're going to learn a lot from a gentleman I know quite well. He has done lots of work in the community, uh, and he is Andre Watkins. How we doing, Andre?
Oh, we're doing good, man. Thanks for having me on tonight.
All right, Andre, the reason why I brought you on the show tonight is because currently you work in education. You are a education consultant. Not only have you consulted here in Waco, but you have consulted all over the state of Texas. Is that correct?
Right. We have done work with Austin ISD, Houston ISD, Harris County Department of Education, as well as starting a new venture in Forney ISD up in the Dallas area.
Okay, okay. So now I have known you as, for working in the community, volunteer coaching, doing a lot of different things in the community. However, you really, I really got to know your expertise when when we were going through the ordeal with Dr. Nelson, and the board was considering whether or not to keep him on as superintendent after he had a very unfortunate run-in with law enforcement.
Right.
That's water under the bridge. That's behind us. And you made a very, very strong case for keeping Dr. Nelson. And not only did you bring it up, did you bring up issues related to how the district was when he arrived, but you also spoke about how the district was transformed through some work that you had done in the district as well.
Right.
Can you tell us about that work that you did?
Well, we were in a bad state as a school district, and that's me speaking not only as a former employee, but in speaking as a parent who has had children come through Waco ISD, a daughter who graduated last year and did quite well with the dual credit program with Waco ISD, and a son who's currently a freshman at Waco High. So it's not only where I made my coins, but it's where I invested my biggest treasure, which is my children. And I stand firm on the statement that we were in some pretty bad shape. We were in a lot of what we call disproportionality, which shows that a disproportionate amount of brown people are being punished, being excluded, and are a victim of punitive discipline measures and exclusionary practices. So we had administrators who, one of them being Mr. Ed Love, who went to a conference and saw restorative discipline as an option, or restorative justice as an option to using punitive practices which isolate and ask kids to get themselves together in isolation, which we know it doesn't make much sense. Yeah, those of us who are dog owners, if you have a dog and you chain your dog to a tree and you leave your dog chained under that dog develops even more antisocial tendencies than whatever activity caused you to put the dog chained to the tree.
Absolutely.
Right. So what we do with children is we put children in cubicles in ISS. We put them in timeout. We send them home for 1 to 3 days, and we tell them to get themselves together and then come back. I mean, to say that out loud. I mean, at 16, were you capable of getting yourself together?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And
Right.
and the thing that, again, that's punishment is let me put it like this. Everybody, when we ever have an issue, everybody wants to talk about consequences and how those consequences making somebody pay for the crime or the deed they did. But we seldom talk about how that crime or that punishment helps us move the ball along the course that we were on anyway.
Right.
The punishment, though it may need to be, equal to what what was committed. However, it doesn't need to take the kid completely off the course of what school is intended for, which is what now? Getting an education, right?
Education in so many ways. I mean,
So we would the district, WISD, the community, because the community is responsible for everything that happens in the school, whether we believe that or not, is that the people that represent us, the people that work in our school, should uphold the values of our community.
right.
And again, so what I'm saying is that the community, along with the district, was disproportionately punitive toward our children.
Correct. If you look at the demographic numbers of what our schools are made up of, and you balance that against the discipline numbers, you would think that there were more black and brown children than there were children that looked differently than that. That wasn't the case, but the preponderance of the discipline evidence was that the black and brown children were being removed from class through disciplinary measures more often than not. Then when you look at the makeup of the staff of the district, and you see that the problems that we have culturally with identifying with one another and having value systems come directly from the part that we don't have an intentional practice that shows us how to apply each other's culture and form joint value systems. Neither do we have hiring practices.
Did you say hiring practices?
Hiring practices that seek out equal representation so that every
You mean
child,
among the teachers and the administrators?
I believe both. I believe both. I believe that without having intentional means of seeing that our children are well represented with the value systems that are similar to theirs. And I emphasize value systems because you can have the same ethnicity in different value systems. Mm-hmm. So I emphasize value systems, which means that you're looking for indigenous leadership that comes from the very areas that you're serving. I'll bring it home for you.
Okay.
If we have a restaurant and we're serving a particular culture in that restaurant, then we probably need to have recipes and other things that are natural or familiar to the people that we're serving. And if we do not have that in place, then we're not going to get a very good reception from the people that we're
from the community that we're trying to serve.
Absolutely. So our cookbook is invalid right now.
That's a very interesting way of putting it. So so listen. What you're saying is that we're serving up a product that our children are not familiar with based on their cultural experiences. That would be the same as trying to teach a Chinese person English without knowing Chinese.
That would be the equivalency of that. Well, what you would have to do is you would have to immerse that person in a totally unfamiliar culture and then depend on them to make themselves comfortable in what you've immersed them in. Now, 1 out of 10 people will find success. 3 more out of those 10 people will stumble through it. But
1 out of 10
will
is
fail.
failure, though.
But 6 will fail. 6 will fail completely.
So let's get back to, let me reorient us. So before Dr. Nelson arrived, there was disproportionate discipline being handed down.
Right.
All right. And that was something that the district was aware of.
Oh, yes.
Were they aware of it because it's something that they brought up themselves, or was something that was cited by another outside entity? How did, again, I guess what I'm asking is how was it discovered, or how was it brought up that discipline was disproportionately applied to black and brown kids?
Well, that comes up 2 ways in school districts as a general practice. One, everybody compiles data. So when the data is compiled, it is compiled by the district and the data is sent to TEA. Okay? So when Waco ISD compiled their data, I'm fairly certain more certain than not by a long shot that somebody said, whoops, we're going to have a problem. And when the TEA got the information, they said, oh, yeah, buddy, you got a problem. So it was self-reported data that found that out. So I'm fairly certain that it was known, before the data returned. But here's the flaw in the referral process as it is done right now. The referrals are still done on paper and then data entered into a kind of an antiquated database in the computer. Mm-hmm. Okay? So there's a lag time between when the action occurs and the compilation of data that lets you know you have a systematic problem, because you analyze data to find fault in your systems.
Absolutely.
So by the time you find that the data has been extrapolated and you find the hole in your system, it is time to report. So there's no way to immediately address. The fire has to burn all the way through the ceiling before you even get the water hose in its current state.
Now, this antiquated system of transmitting paper documents to electronic data.
Mm-hmm.
Those are things that was tackled 20 years ago when we were entering the age of information. Mm-hmm. Is there a reason why we are tackling it this way and not using real live data? Meaning that why can't a teacher put a referral in on a web interface or a app that they have in the classroom? I know it's a rhetorical question. My point is, do you think fairness was ever part of the district's overall goal when implementing discipline?
I think that most of the people that are in that chain of command that have made those decisions, they've become locked into business as usual. And any kind of transformational work is going to cause some stretching in your business model. And that stretching in your business model will always uncover some areas within which the business can do better at the product that they're developing. And in education, it's an 100% people product.
Absolutely.
You have people working on people to become better people. So the people that are working on the people and working with the people, they have egos, they have feelings, they have reactions, such as everyone else does. So when you're causing yourself to look at a system like that and to delve into its infrastructure and how it's functioning, it's going to be uncomfortable to make that change.
All right. That's very great insight by one Andre Watkins, statewide educational consultant. You work with many different districts, and you also contract through many different agencies to provide systems analysis.
Right.
In education as well as other industries. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. But you kind of cut your teeth in the business in education.
Right.
If I'm not mistaken.
Right. So, I had a floor up experience in education. I was hired as a behavioral aide at the alternative campus when it was located on South 8th Street in Waco. And from there, sitting in the ISS room, I discovered that if I got out of the room and went to where the problems were occurring, pretty much I could lighten my own workload. Either that or I could sit in that room and wait on 22 kids to come join me, which at some point of the day, it was going to happen. So I started going to the classrooms and helping the teachers find different ways to relate to kids who had already been traumatized by the education system. They'd already been told by 2 or 3 schools, 2 or 3 different times that they weren't good enough.
Oh, man.
So once we did that, the administrator that was over that school was Ed Love. He recognized that, hey, that's something that we need to make as a general practice and not as just something you're taking an initiative to do. So I'm kind of like the vampire of the first vampire of the behavior aids,
So I'm going to tell you, we're going to open this up, Andre, to callers, if you don't mind.
Sure.
You can give us a call at 254-301-5543. That's 301-5543. We're going to also open this up for questions, comments, and solutions. Again, we open it up for questions, comments, and solutions. We ask that you keep it respectful and kind. in your assessment of Waco ISD. Now, this is not. I want to put this out here. We want to be honest, but we want to be respectful.
Right.
About what's going on in our schools. I specifically, I have many friends, we both have many friends that are educators, that have spent many years in education. However, I didn't want to come in and put them on the spot and have them talk about things that may put people in their chain of command in a bad light.
Right.
So in essence, you're the perfect guest, because not only are you able to speak freely about what goes on not only in WISD, but you have other school districts that you manage process systems,
right,
that you can compare it to,
right,
and you can definitely compare it to a system that works,
right,
that is equitable, versus what existed at Waco ISD prior to Dr. Nelson arriving. Right. And I keep saying prior to Dr. Nelson arriving because this was the state that our district was in prior to him getting here. By and large, we have made some regression in losing him, because we are at a situation now where we take a superintendent who was engaged in the community, who was embedded in the community. Let me say that. He wasn't only engaged, but he was embedded. He was everywhere there was somebody, or everywhere there was an organization or a child or a kid, he was there getting input, letting them know they had his support, this, that, and the other, to a situation where now, which is we have an interim superintendent, but for all intents and purposes, the board is in leadership of the school district at this point, and they are not making headway toward getting any community input, any community interaction, engaging the community at all. Now this is full disclosure. I reached out to both Stephanie Carterwig and Norma Manning to be on my podcast. I did not get an answer from neither one of them. So I feel like I did my due diligence to get them involved. I also reached out to Stephanie Carterwig because we had a partner, which is Carver Neighborhood Association, who wants to host a forum with her. That's her voting. Those are her constituents. She represents them. They're eager to find out what's going on with the hiring process, and any angle they take, it's been very difficult to get any input or any back and forth conversation. Now, you and I had a discussion at the time I booked you for this interview, and you had some very interesting points about community interaction is just not one way.
Right.
It is not only them listening, not only us listening to what they say, but us having the opportunity to express our desires as well. And kind of tell us, how does that work in a community, and why is that so important?
It is always important for the community's voice to be heard. As a rapper, Mos Def, on the beginning of his Black on Both Sides album, he says that hip-hop is not a giant that comes out of the woods and visits the townspeople. Hip-hop is the people. So however you're doing is how hip-hop is doing. I think that's the same parallel with the school district. The school district is not a giant that comes out of the woods to visit the people. The school district is the people. As Dr. Nelson used to say, we don't keep the good kids at home. They send their very best every day. They don't keep the rocket scientists at home. They send all of them to school.
Absolutely.
So seeing as how that is a representation of the best of our community, I think the community's voice should be paramount in the decisions that are made by the school board. The rule of few over many never ends well. It never ends well for the many.
So let me say this. So you bring up a very good. The people, the school district is the people, right? And so when you have a school district that is predominantly, predominantly is not even a good word. Majority isn't a good word either. Overwhelmingly minority, right? And the school board is not representative of the kids and the parents. what should the school board do, administrators do, to reach out to the community and let them know that they are sensitive to their. I'm not saying that they have to turn themselves black. What I'm saying is they have to recognize that there's a cultural, ethnic difference in who makes decisions for the school and the kids that are in the school and the parents that have sent their kids to school. Is there some obligation to that board to kind of interact with the school district? I mean, with the parents and his kids.
I would say best practices, there should be an obligation for best practices. Now, if we're not interested in best practices, then we can choose to do business as usual. But if best practices are what we're interested in, then there should be a constant line of communication through organized forums where our school board members don't wait for the community to come to a meeting, but for our school board members to engage the community where the community feels comfortable. And to have dialogue, not just be heard and not just hear us, but to have dialogue in a respectful manner to where everybody is heard and there's a set of values that are set forth that help us to guide the conversation and for all of us to be respected. I also want to make this disclaimer about our district. Having worked in the district for a number of years, there are a large number of people fighting the good fight from within. A large number of people that I love and care about that are doing the work, continuing the work that we were all a part of when I was there. And there was no way, shape, form, and fashion that I was the only person doing the work. It was an organized effort of a lot of people. I just happened to be blessed to be the vocal part of that at times and to be influential in the organizing. And the people are still here. There are some ways where that kind of work gets sensitive when you're doing transformational work and when people are having to address their own bias. That becomes painful. And people retreat back into their comfort zone because addressing their own bias means that they have to lay themselves open before the people they're serving. And that's not comfortable. People have gotten this education, they've gotten this position, they've worked their way up, and that gives them a privilege and a protection that they're not always willing to put down. So one of the things that we want to continue to do as a community is to make those in those positions feel respected, but also get ourselves respected at the same time. And so I think that those forums and those organized conversations are the best way to make that happen. How do you serve my children best? By knowing me and by allowing me to know you.
Absolutely. I think that's a very important aspect of being a great leader. It's leadership in general. It's knowing the people that you're leading. Now, I did get some input from the councilwoman, Andrea Bearfield. She said there's a Transformation Zone board meeting tonight, coincidentally, because there hadn't been much press about it, or there hadn't been, heads up on what kind of business are going to be handled at that board meeting. Again, I think there is a news desert amongst the people in our community about the decisions that are going to be made that are going to affect the people in our community. Now, that's one of the things I think that has to be addressed by not only the board, but other entities within our community. I think Andrea, along with the city council, has done a tremendous job of reaching out to create forums, town halls, community updates, all kind of stuff to make sure that the people are aware of what's going on around them as Waco is in the midst of a, economic boom. Right. And a infrastructure upgrade in certain communities. And the city's doing a great job of that. In this critical time, I just don't see the same kind of effort to reach the people by the Waco ISD Board of Trustees. Again, when we were going through the situation with Dr. Nelson as a community, I commend Pat Atkins for taking steps toward engaging the community. However, the unfortunate part about that engagement is we didn't get a chance to voice our opinion to him outside of public comment that you made during the board meeting, the special board meeting, and also, unfortunately, they limited the number of people that could make public comment.
Right.
So that was quite unfortunate in that. So it almost seems like when you do things like that, there's a purposeful attempt to at the very least limit public comment and public influence. And I think the people should have influence because the Board of Trustees is simply a representative body for the people of the community.
Right.
They are not there to make decisions without considering community input. And I think there's been a huge effort in this point, at this particular point in time, by the Board of Trustees to not to engage the community, considering all the decisions that are in front of us related to the new superintendent.
Right. I think coming to a consensus is as old as fire, man. You know, as long as there's been a fire where people sat around and discussed the events of the day and what was going to happen the next day, they've been coming to consensus. And for us to get in this technological age where we have remote control fireplaces now and forget things like coming to a consensus, I think it's absurd. I think sometimes we've gotten so smart that we're actually getting real dumb.
But Andre, don't you think one of the things that people who are used to handing down policies and guidelines, they're used to doing it without considering the voice of the people?
Right, because in the end, the product in mass that is put out by our school districts is not reflected in the body of people that govern those districts. When I went to Waco High, my daughter was actually going to Rappaport Academy.
When you worked at Waco High?
When I went to work at Waco High, she was going to Rappaport Academy. So as we started picking up steam with what we were doing at Waco High, one of the things that I reasoned to myself was that I cannot sell to people what I'm not buying. So my daughter transferred from Rappaport to Waco High, where she graduated from Waco High. She participated in athletics. She participated in dual credit. She's a freshman at Sam Houston going into her sophomore year, but she has enough credits to be a junior. Now that comes from a combination of what she attained at Rappaport, but it came through Waco High. So it shows that it is not the structure that is the problem. The problem is the interpersonal relationships in our districts are limited to, I see you at 8 a.m., I'll holler at you at 4 p.m. You know, there's very little interaction between the people that are giving their most precious resource to the schools to be taught and the people that are doing the teaching. There's a serious disconnect between staff and parent. And when staff and parent begin to have organized conversations where everybody's heard, everybody gets a chance to share from the heart, then we will begin to have a relationship that brings us to consensus. That means everybody has an input on how to best educate our children. And right now, that's what's missing here.
So they're trying to push the education piece down from the top down.
I believe that's right, and I don't believe that is without merit completely. But what I'm saying is that if you're going to make my sandwich the way I like it, then I need to be able to tell you what I would like on my sandwich. I need to tell you how I fixed it yesterday, because when I fixed it yesterday, I did it perfectly. You know? I need to tell you where I got my groceries from, and then we can put this masterpiece together as one.
So you're just simply suggesting that the education process be a collaboration between the community and the school system.
Absolutely. And it has to be very intentional. It has to be as structured as your systems are structured now, which means that we have to get the word out that we would like to have these conversations. We need to have them in groups small enough to be meaningful, which means no more than 20 people. We need to not have people come to us in the ivory tower, but we need to go where the people are so that we're in their comfort zone. So not only do we make them feel at ease and important, but we're also immersing ourselves in a culture that we may be unfamiliar with. Or conversely, we may be so familiar with it that we don't want to go back because it holds bad memories for us.
Absolutely. And when you say bad memories, you're really talking about the parents and when they were going through the same institutional education.
Likewise, and likewise, I'm also talking about some of our educators
Wow.
who we wouldn't think had walked on some of the same paths. That when we've done poverty and privilege exercises in the school district, you discover things about some of our educators that they're hiding from themselves. You understand what I'm saying? When you have been through a trauma, you tend not to want to visit those places where
Absolutely.
you've been traumatized.
Absolutely.
So we're dealing with a very human aspect. So we cannot just point our fingers and wave our fingers at the educators and say, "Oh, you bad educators." No, we have to understand that they've been through trauma also.
Now, as you talk about this, you know, you get me to understand that it's as much about add, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing, but it's even more about people.
Absolutely. I mean, you got to think about it. A mechanic works on cars, airplanes, whatever kind of machine they're fixing. If they don't get their hands in it, not much work is going to be done. So when we're dealing with the school district, we have a group of people who've achieved a reasonable modicum of education. But you have to put your hands into what you're working on, and you're going to get dirty when you do that.
So why do you think they've built the system now? Since you say put your hands on to get dirty, why do they build systems that don't create real, true, genuine interaction between teachers and parents and teachers and students? I mean, I can just talk about, when I was in school and even when my kids were in school, there was a clear barrier between me and certain teachers. They had very little interest in me, and consequently, I had very little interest in them. But there were teachers who had lots of interest in me.
Mm-hmm.
Consequently, I had lots of interest in them, and in turn, I did very well in those subjects. Why isn't that interest something that is implicitly talked about when you talk about administering education? Because it's really not talked about as when you talk, like, let me give my daughter a shout out. My daughter graduated last year from the University of Texas at Tyler with an education degree. She'll be teaching this upcoming year.
Mm-hmm.
And they talk about the theories of learning and all that kind of stuff. But when she talks about how she wants to impact the classroom, that's really coming from not something a teacher told her. That's coming from her heart. Like, that's coming from how she wants to make a difference in our community as a teacher. Is that something that's talked about, or when you're in an interview or in the selection process of an educator, because you could simply look at certain teachers' interactions when I was growing up and realize they really didn't need to be teachers.
Right. They didn't like people, not to mention children. I've been blessed to speak to MCC's pedagogy class multiple times, and Baylor University's pedagogy class once. And one of the things that
so for to get a common understanding of a word, because some of us may not know, what is pedagogy?
Pedagogy is where they're teaching teachers the very principles of how to teach people.
Okay, gotcha. Gotcha.
So speaking to those classes and able to share from my experience on forming connections, which is the strength upon which I built my work in education and continue to do so. Making those connections is something that should be done first. Sherwin Patton, who's the executive director of Life Anew, along with his wife Kim Patton, they say that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So when you come into the beginning of the school year, you got this big list of rules you've laminated and put them on the wall, right? Well, those rules are trash, really, because they only come from your perspective and your mind. But if you come in and you discuss with the group of young people who you're going to be sharing this journey with, if you look at them like that, I'm sharing the journey of this next year of our lives together with you. And you ask them, what's the best part about you? They will tell you the rules with which they live their lives by. So it's not like at 8 a.m. I got to be this whole nother person because I'm sharing this space with you. It's no, I get to be the best of me from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. And I'm honored that you asked me about the best part of me. You didn't look at my referral count from last year. You didn't look at my last name and say, oh, all of them was bad when I had them. You didn't look at my hair. You didn't look at my shoes. You didn't look at any of that. But you asked me what was the best part of me. Now, just imagine if you spent the first week of your school year exploring the best part of every student you had.
That's an amazing concept.
Right.
And we're sitting here having a conversation with Andre Watkins, education consultant all over the state of Texas. And we would like to have your input if you have any questions for Mr. Watkins, any input regarding Waco ISD and where we should go from this point, any information that you would like to share with us.
There's a question on Facebook.
Beg your pardon?
There's a question on Facebook.
What? There is a question?
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
It says, is policy the answer? If so, is it with the school board janitor, or where should folks start?
Okay, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think policy is needed to introduce the concepts, but I think ultimately the responsibility lies on us interpersonally. You know, just like we're sitting down having a discourse right now on Facebook and you're participating and we're all hearing each other and then we're also being heard. I think that is the key. Now, if we have to put policy in place to organize times and spaces for that to happen, I think that is a great idea. I think that's a great idea. And I've seen it work, and I continue to see it work in my line of work. So it's not something that I'm selling without having a body of work that justifies doing so. There is a body of work out there that justifies doing this work, large scale.
How do we get the demographic to match the student body?
Okay, you're talking about, I'm assuming we're going to make an assumption here, and they're talking about the staff demographic.
Yeah, that's
The staff and administration.
Okay.
So I'm not sure. Okay. So I'm not a educator. I never worked in education, but I've coached in Little League kids of all creeds, colors, nationalities, heights, and sizes. Because I was doing something I loved, I can honestly say I was always able to relate I found a way to relate to each and every kid where we could execute a highly functioning offense and defense, special teams. Right? So I don't think the staff, just because it's the kids that are black, needs to be black. However, if you're not sensitive to the needs of African American, Hispanic, Asian, white kids, and your demographic is majority those kids, you should look for another group to teach.
Well, I also think that just computers, people are meat computers. We're computers made out of meat. So what I'm saying is if the programming between two computers does not match, it's going to be very hard, if not impossible, for them to communicate and for them to execute commands and get something done. So why not invest in a patch program, just like we do on our laptops or on our home PCs or our Macs or whatever, to make them talk to something else? So sitting down and coming to a consensus is like creating patch programs for these meat computers in our head that we call our brains. So we share experiences. You look at everybody as being a virtual walking library. So if I share a book from my shelf with a book from your shelf, then we're able to come back and communicate in a way where we can get complex tasks done. So why not take a chance on the same format that you use to coach and get some coaching done in the classroom where everybody feels a part? I would wager to say that you found something special about every kid on your team.
Kid.
Something that they could do.
Every kid.
And you told them to just do the heck.
Every kid.
Right. You've told them to just do the heck out of whatever you do.
The very best they could do was
Right.
always good enough for me.
Right. So what if we took that first week of school and we didn't pull out any books? We just simply spent time discussing the best of ourselves.
So what you're suggesting here, this is radical what you're suggesting.
Mm-hmm.
What you're suggesting is that a teacher spend time getting to know a kid before they teach him anything.
The best teachers have always done it. The best teachers that we have always done it. I went to Midway and I graduated in 93. There were not a lot of people that looked like me out there. But I want to shout out a particular teacher and coach.
Not many of them wore beards. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, something like that. David Owens was a teacher I had out there. And when I showed up in David Owens' class, David Owens asked each one of us in a government class to stand up and give a speech as if we were running for office. Tell people why we should win. And what he was doing was he was pulling out of us our best values. So instead of having a predisposition by looking at data and saying, oh, well, Rocky's in my class and Rocky gets in trouble every year. Instead of saying that, he said, okay,
right, though.
Well, your teachers that had you pulled the best out of you.
Absolutely. No doubt about it.
Right.
No doubt about it.
Right.
I can't even argue that point.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm saying is it's been done, but it's just like most things with tech. We've forgotten how to spell because we text in acronyms. So it's not that we never knew how to spell, but that we found a way that helps us to avoid the burden of having correct syntax and grammar, so we lean on that. I think we've done the same thing with dealing with complex issues in our schools. We found a way of doing business that helps us avoid the tough parts.
We have a comment from Daryl Stimson Sr. Mm-hmm. No, that's Durrell. but he was named after Duriel Harris, so that's why I say that. Anyway, but he has a very good point. What's eye-opening is the lack of cultural awareness by educators. Every child is not the same,
right?
And that is a very, very, very good comment because that is a lot of times at the very crux of the problem is that we're trying to treat every child the same. I have 4 wonderful, amazing, incredible children, 4 very different children.
Right.
I cannot use the same practices to reach each and every one of them, though I've tried. But I've come to realize as a parent, each one of them is very unique, and it's my job as a parent, in order to connect with them, I have to adjust my parenting style so that I can make the impression that I'd like to make, even though now they all have the same values, same value system. They know right from wrong. They know how to read, write, arithmetic. They know how to count money and drive now.
Right.
So we were able to teach them all the same things. However, each one of them learned in a very different way. And I think we have to take that in account when we're teaching our children. I don't know that teachers are given the leeway and the latitude to do so. You would know that better than I would.
Well, I know that they're not. So that's why I made the disclaimer earlier. We're not saying bad educator, bad educator. What we're doing is we're challenging the structures that are put in place to rearrange themselves and make room for this kind of work. If we do this kind of work first, then the learning environment becomes one that's not hierarchical. It's not about who's in the top position, who's behind the big desk, and the people in front are at their mercy. It becomes one of community where I want to learn from you because I know you want to teach me. And that's not as common as we fool ourselves into believing. We think that just because we showed up at work this morning with our briefcase and we put something up on the board, that they know that we want to teach them. And that's not absolutely true. If you look at surveys across the district in many districts where I work. You have 7th grade students that are saying, I don't know if my teacher likes me. That should be a problem for the teacher. It should be a problem either you really don't like them and you need some personal work, or the child has you always messed up. And we need to do some work so that you can convey your true self to that child. Either way, by sitting down and coming to a consensus using restorative practices as a widespread mainstream thing, we can address both of those issues.
Okay, I have a comment by Bobby Touchstone Jr., my former business partner and very good friend. He says, I think what made Dr. Nelson so effective was his presence in the community and his willingness to hold both the students, teachers, and parents accountable, meeting the community where they are is imperative. You're absolutely right, Bobby. But here's my question. This is what I always kind of ponder with Dr. Nelson. We all will admit he was a great leader. Mm-hmm. We all will admit that he made a purpose. His purpose was to engage the community, whatever organization it may be, whether it be the Hispanic Chamber, the Black Chamber, the NAACP, the Waco Chamber, the Greater Waco Chamber of Commerce, whatever. And we know he was not of the same ethnicity of previous superintendents, right? Mm-hmm. Did he take on that because he had to, or someone of another ethnicity doesn't feel that's part of the job, or they have to reach out like that? Because he reached out. He didn't have to reach out as much as he did because he was already a minority. Mm. So he had a connection, an innate connection that many of the other superintendents didn't have. But he put actions behind that connection. Right. Whereas other superintendents, whether it be Jerry Majors, Hernandez, Kane, all these other people, you didn't see them down at the eatery shaking hands and meeting people. You didn't see them at the NAACP meeting. You didn't see them at Feast of Knees. Okay. You know what I mean? So did his ethnicity bring something special to the table, or was that more of an individual trait?
I think that's individual, because I can find people that look like me that won't even speak to me in a church. So I'm just thinking that that's more of the kind of person that he was. He had a magnanimous personality. When he walked into a room, he kind of lit the room up. And I say that even though he and I had our disagreements on some things, but I say with much respect that the brother always had a listening ear.
Absolutely. Absolutely. To this day. So, and he was he had a wealth of knowledge and information. So when the community came together in his defense, it was much more in our own defense. Right. As much in our own defense as his defense, because we are very skeptical about the fact that whomever you hire, whether it be black, white, male, or female, they may not have the same set of gifts.
Or the same desire.
Say that again.
The same desire to become a part of the community. Now, I would like to also say that the previous superintendent before Dr. Nelson was a person that made a way for me to have the type of position that I had in the school district, because it was not well received in the beginning. Well, so she did make that happen. So I don't want to.
So set them free. I'm supposed to have a parade for you.
Well, what I'm saying, I would like to say that everybody that looks like me has the same set of values, or everybody that looks different. That would make the world real easy to navigate. But that's not always the truth. So as much as I champion Dr. Nelson for what he did, I also have to champion others who made provisions for me to do the work, and for other people to continue to be there and do the work that they're doing within the school district. He brought a lot of innovative things in, a lot of nuts and bolts stuff, as well as a motivation and a personal factor that maybe we were missing. And it still extends itself and it still continues because the people that did the work are still in the district. So we have to find out systematically how we can continue to support them in doing the work that got those results. That's the question that I was asking at the school board meeting. Okay, you're going to do what you're going to do, but how are you going to ensure that our babies get this best work that we've seen over this last couple of years? That's the question that we need to ask. What happened to those practices? Did you just stop doing what he was doing because of a mistake he made off the job? Do we just stop doing what he was doing even though it was working? And why did we stop? The blueprint was there. Why are we not following it? In so much that if you would hire him as a consultant to the district,
Hello.
to allow the work to continue that was benefiting our children,
Hello.
I bet the community would smile upon you for that.
So again, that's a very innovative idea, is to not serve in the capacity as superintendent, but go back, since you're paying them $96,000 to go away.
Hello.
Anyway, to bring him back as a consultant so he can finish the job that he started by implementing the practices and innovative ideas that obviously had a positive impact on our children.
And then we cannot have this discussion without having the discussion about motivation through soft skills. There's an approach that some people have that will cause you to want to give your best effort. When you were talking about your Little League team, I know you. I know you're an effective communicator. I bet there was a way that you could talk to little Billy, who can't do anything but this one thing, and let little Billy know that that was the most important thing in the world at that moment. I think Dr. Nelson had that gift in a certain kind of way that could either rub you wrong, but even when it rubbed you wrong, it made you want to show him that you could do it anyway. You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely. It's just, even his, as you could say this, even his skepticism was positive.
Right. And not many people are able to do that. And that's not to talk or put anybody else down. That's just to emphasize and give him his flowers for something that he could do. And I also think, getting back to the question that was asked when somebody said, how do you keep it rolling? Is it the system? Yes and no. There are elements of any system that are successful. We just cannot be afraid to analyze them and determine which ones are not. And then once we determine which ones are not, we need to stop doing that, because it's stupid to keep doing it. If suspensions worked, the schools with the highest suspension numbers would have the best scores.
That's not how it works, though.
That's not how it works. I mean, you're a numbers guy. So if the numbers on something are not making sense, then generally, as a businessman, a successful businessman, you're not going to continue that practice.
Absolutely not.
So why are we doing it in schools?
Again, I some things. Let me tell you a story, a quick little story about one of my kids. So because I don't want to put them on the spot. One of my kids was cutting up, and the teacher came to me. My kid was no more than maybe 5, 6 years old. And my teacher said, he cuts up. I said, yeah, he cuts up at home too. She says, I think we really should consider medicating him. I was like, you know what, you right. And I got his medicine right around my waist. And she looked at me and was like, oh my goodness. And I'm like, man, ain't nothing wrong with him. Excuse me. That narrows it down. But ain't nothing wrong with him, but he needs discipline. So next time, moving forward, when he cuts up, you've tried it your way. Now do it my way. Just tell him you're going to call his daddy and see how quick he get a handle on his faculties and his ability to keep his butt in his seat.
I like that. Get a handle on your faculties. I'm going to use that.
Yeah, and so she says that was during a parent teacher sitting. The next parent teacher sitting, guess what she told me? He's doing a great job. I just have to mention you. I'm gonna call you, and he's going. I say, yeah, you're gonna have to call me once or twice too. Now you can't just say it, because pretty soon he gonna get it that you bluffing.
Right. Now what happened was a cultural exchange. What was culturally appropriate in your household was shared with the teacher, and the teacher added another club to her bag, right? Because maybe in her house, what you were talking about, she was appalled, right? So it was probably not culturally acceptable in her house. And so it wasn't wrong, but it was different. And once she knew that, she found out a value. She found out that in your house, the belt has value. So once she was able to put once she was able to put that into play, she was able to deal with your most precious resource in a better way by going to the source to find out how to deal with it.
Look at her. She taught him how to read and write.
That's right.
But at the end of the day, I think in bringing that up, it's like our kids, and when I say our kids, I mean black and brown and white kids who are in situations when people aren't familiar with the cultural aspects of the child. I know I've raised 2 little black boys, and I know sitting down and being still ain't nowhere part of their program. At no age, you understand. But I knew as a coach, even in situations where I could not spank the children, because I didn't spank kids as a coach. I didn't think that was appropriate. But I knew how to get that energy out of them.
Oh, yeah.
And there was a way for me to deal with them, because I would run. Are you ready to listen now? After a couple laps around the backstop,
Right.
they were ready to listen.
Oh, yeah.
So I think, again, it all goes back to there are ways to get what you want to get done, but it's probably not going to be the same for each kid. And you, as a parent, as a coach, and as a teacher and administrator, you really gotta want to reach a kid in order to do it. If you find it difficult, because everybody, all of us, your father, just like you got a difficult child too. You got some ones that are easy, but you also got some that are difficult.
Yeah.
And so, and it takes, but just exploring different options to reach the difficult child. You can do it. You can do it.
They sell tool sets, and not all the tools look the same. You got metric, you got standard, because you cannot apply the same tool to every job. So why are we looking at these little people with these organic computers in their head, thinking that they're gonna all march to the beat of one drum every day? I mean, to me, it just seems like sometimes we're a little bit ridiculous because it didn't even work for us.
Yeah, but again, I think that, to teachers' credits, I'm not in the schools every day, so I don't know what it feels like in the school. But it seems that the standardized testing puts so much pressure on the entire system. That's from the school board, superintendent on down, that I would say that other than dealing with the elements of the test, is there much time for much else?
No, I don't think there is, but we just said it, standardized testing. If I come in here with a pair of vice grips and tell you go change your tire, how successful are you going to be?
I can't do that.
You cannot do it. It's going to take a number of different tools. And it may even take a different position laying on the ground, or it may take trying to move the car to a better position where you can get at what you're working on. So why are we using a one-size-fits-all instrument to gauge the intelligence of all these little universes walking around? I don't understand that. The standardized testing is an oxymoron to me, because are they all going into the same profession? Did they all start with the same base intellect? Do they all start with the same cultural background? Do they all come to school with the same value systems? No. So how is one test going to determine all these little special people? And I say special in a great way, like my mom says when she says I'm special.
Yeah.
How is one test going to find all these unique personalities best?
I just think, Andre, is that we get kids to school, and we decide we're going to teach them something, but to ignore how the condition they arrive to school is ridiculous. And until we, as a district, as a community, as a system, education in general, until we're willing to address how the kids arrive on campus, we cannot put out our best products in the educational system.
Right.
Because that ultimately, from where you start, is ultimately will dictate how you finish. You take the poorest kids in our community, oftentimes they're the poorest performing kids in school. They're not doing that because they were born without the ability. It's just that where they start, there's a lot to overcome when you talk about poverty and things of that nature. And our system must be built to even provide a fair chance for even those kids.
Let's talk about socioeconomics for a minute in that same vein. All right. You look at where people live. If I'm a child and I live in a neighborhood where the neighbor has been taken out and it's just the hood, I don't see any service providers that live by me. I see no doctors that live by me. I see no merchants that live by me. I see none of the people who are telling me that I should be like them that live by me. Okay? It's almost like where I live is not good enough, so they don't want to live by me. So I come with that bias, first of all. You don't even want to be by me. Okay? Then when I come to the school, you're telling me how to wear my hair. You're telling me how to wear my clothes. You're telling me that my mama wasted money on these shoes that make me feel really good because I don't have much but these shoes. But you're telling me what we should be doing with all that, but you're telling me from over there. You see what I'm saying?
It.
So those barriers and those bias have to be discussed, and we can't be so fragile about some of the mess that we bring to these children that we're not willing to address that. Conversely, when the community comes to engage in these conversations, we have to be willing to heal past hurt so that we can move forward with the best interests of our children. Yes, there are some teachers and some administrators who have mistreated you, who have let you down, who have judged you. Yes. And we can heal from that and move forward if we spend time in intentional conversations and intentional settings together. So it has to happen from both ends. You know, we can't just, wag our finger and, bad teacher. My mother's an educator. My father's an educator. My father, 30 years, almost 30 years at MCC. My mother, plus 20 plus years in La Vega School District, Waco ISD, McGregor ISD. So I come from a family that values education. Now, as far as formal education, I am the black sheep of my family. I am the kid who didn't quite fit into the box of formal education. Okay? So,
but you got it done.
Right. Almost through. I'm not through all the way. But I am that kid that's sitting in your class that is very intelligent, but you haven't found a way to reach that kid. I am that kid. Okay? And that kid can learn. That kid can progress. That kid can excel. So that is what I am sharing with as many people as utilize the gifts that I've been given. And many other people are doing the same work in conjunction with what I'm doing. And what we're saying is these children can learn. They learn how to turn on the Xbox. They learn how to work. They know how to work your phone better than you can.
Absolutely. At a very young age.
At a very young age. Leave your phone and tablet around that same baby that you say can't be still. And they find something that they're interested in and they are still. So the question as adults that we have to ask ourselves is, are you as interesting as you think you are?
That's a good question. Mm-hmm. You get in the mirror with that question, you may find some inadequacies, some.
But we can't be afraid of that. It's okay.
Absolutely.
That's okay.
Absolutely.
It's okay.
Absolutely.
And once we determine that in the best interest of educating children, that we're all going to look in this mirror and put these telescopes and microscopes down, and we all get in the mirror, then we'll be surprised. I've seen it work. We're talking about Waco ISD. I've seen these principles work at Waco High, where we went from, triple digit enrollment to constant quadruple digit enrollment. Are people moving into Waco? No, they're moving out. People that had their kids other places are bringing their kids back to Waco High. That is a fact. I've seen teacher surveys change from when Mr. Love and that administration got there to very recently. We shared some data with each other, and I've seen where the teacher surveys go up because the interest in forming relationships is still going on there. That doesn't mean that there's no problems. That would be absolutely ridiculous for us to say, well, this works and it has no problems. No, the problems are existing now, but everywhere. But if you're not doing anything to develop the relationships, think about what you could have going on.
Absolutely. Like, one of the things is at WISD, there are a lot of great examples of, well, I guess you could say products that came out of WISD. There are a lot of great examples, me being one, of how you can go through WISD, be a decent student, and come out and help your community. There are a lot of examples of that. Absolutely. And I am a credit. I'm a credit to my community only because I had teachers and administrators that cared about me. If it weren't for not my coaches and my and a number of teachers, there's no way I would have graduated high school. Okay. But because Bobby Jacobs took an interest in me, and he made me, I was his, he was gonna make sure I graduated.
Right.
And he made sure that I behaved myself. Mm-hmm. And he had tools in his toolbox.
That waist trainer.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, though I didn't like it very much, but him showing interest in me and giving me the attention I needed enabled me to do something that I probably would not have done otherwise. And I thank him. Every time I see him, I hug his neck and give him dap. Mm-hmm. Because I know without him, man, I would be, there's no telling.
Now let's look at that. Okay. You didn't mind being corrected at the results part of it because you knew that his correction came from a place of concern.
Oh, yeah, no doubt about it.
So how does sending someone away from a school for 3 days show concern?
I mean, it doesn't.
How does putting somebody in the cubicle and telling them to do the work that they were already having difficulty doing in class, how does that show concern? Isolation never shows concern.
Check this here out. I wouldn't want anyone to uncover my disciplinary record in school. So let me just say that. But I can honestly say I was never suspended. And I think I never was suspended because that's what I wanted.
You said something then. If all my cool stuff is at home, Xbox, PlayStation 5 or whatever they got, if all that cool stuff is at home, I really don't want to be here anyway.
Hey, I can hear my mind right now, Mr. Jacobs saying, Mr. Miller, you're not going home. You can forget about that.
Yeah.
You're going to be right here.
Yeah.
You're going to be right here. If you have to look at me all day,
right,
you're going to be right here.
But he let you know you were wanted.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, let's say this now. There are tons of teachers and administrators in our district that are doing the same thing right now. There's tons of them. What I am simply saying is that if that works, let's replicate that over and over
and over again
and over again until all children are reached where they need to be reached. and elevated as far as they can go.
Now, okay, we've completely ignored the put on this podcast, but we're doing a lot of good work.
Okay.
But before we get off, I want you to go over with me and the community. Speak to the community. Look right in that camera.
Okay.
And talk to the community about what healthy interaction looks like between not any community, but Waco and our school board. And where do we start with building, if we could create a call to action from this particular podcast, what would the call to action be based on what the community is willing to do and what the board needs to do?
I think that it's going to take a lot of work. The first thing is we have to get in some intentional conversations with each other, school board members, community members. If you're interested in talking at each other, it's not going to work. But if you would like to talk with people and do some community building, I'm willing to participate in that wholeheartedly. By community building, I mean meeting at places and times that suit both of our personalities, that suit both of our culture systems. We'll come to you if we know we're going to be heard, but we also want you to come to us if you want to be listened to. The current place of our meeting is always in the school board meeting, and the format of that is a little bit insulting, really, if you ask me. It doesn't give much time for dialogue, which is where most problems are solved. It's a lot of diatribe where we're talking at each other, but not much dialogue where we're talking with each other. I also would like for the members of the school board to come talk with us in forums where we can hear what your opinions are and what your moves are, and that we can offer our suggestions to better serve the community as you would want the same respect from us. I also appeal to the community that when we do get these opportunities, we're not going to go in there and make it a complaint session. However, we will share the best of us with the best of them, and we'll get the best result.
Well, Andre, I want to thank you, man, for coming on today. That last soliloquy was well worth. If you don't listen to anything else, if you're catching it late or whatever, make sure you listen to the last few minutes, because he gave the community and the school board a set of detailed instructions of how to carry on a dialogue that benefits our children. It is about our children. Let us never forget that our children is our most precious resource, and it's up to us to ensure as a community that our children get the best education possible, because our education system, I think you said it earlier in our podcast, our education system is our community.
Absolutely.
And with that being said, man, I want to thank you again, Andre. Is there anything you want to mention before you leave? Where can people catch you? Where can they find you? Do you Snapchat? Do you Facebook? If Gothwaite ISD is listening and they need your services, right, what can they contact you?
They can email me at 7piecesolutions@gmail.com.
Okay, 7psolutions@gmail.com.
7piece.
Okay.
All one word. SEVENPEACE.
Just give me a moment. I'm gonna get it up on the screen. That's well worth taking time out. That is the number 7.
No, I got it.
Anyway.
Just cut and paste. 7piece@gmail.com.
7piecesolutions@gmail.com. Yeah. And I reply fairly quickly, so.
Because this is not just your passion. This is how you feed your family.
In the words of great domino players all over Waco, Texas, I do this for a living, not just Christmas and Thanksgiving.
He said, let me put it back up. He said, in the words of great East West,
Yeah. Sharondale is East Waco. Shout out to Sharondale. I touched down in 1975, 2040 King Cole.
Again, but my point is, he's an education consultant. He consults all over the state. Again, you do some work in WISD.
Yes.
So he is engaged with our local school district, and you wouldn't have any problem working with. There's no conflicts if you work with Conley, La Vega,
None at all.
Lorena, Midway, anything like that.
None of that. I'm legit. I got paperwork.
I thank everybody for tuning in. I think because my mama's numbers was up there, brother.
I don't want to be mom.
I can honestly say, man, this podcast there's been people on this podcast the entire time we've been going. I want to thank you for taking time out, man. We went over time, but it was like, it was just easy talking, and we covered a lot of ground, man.
I
But the main
appreciate you
thing
having me.
is we want the community activated. We want the board engaged so we can get to the best school district possible. Not in order to get this done.